Hello students, welcome to this another discussion video on the topic investment in equity securities. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the different forms of equity investments, recognize the different forms of dividends, account for share split, special assessment, redemption of shares, and share rights. So let us discuss first the nature of equity investment. So as we know that equity investments represents ownership in interest in an equity. For example, your ordinary shares or preference share, or the right to acquire ownership interest, just in the case of share option and share warrant. So these are our equity investments. We have here the different categories or investment categories when we talk about investment in equity security. So it could be trading securities or financial assets at fair value through profit or loss, as what we have discussed in the previous lesson. Or it could also be financial asset at fair value through OCI, or investment in associate, or investment in subsidiary, or investment in unquoted equity instruments. So those equity instruments which are not really traded in the stock exchange. So that is why you cannot find a reliable basis of the fair market value. So generally, the equity investments will be measured initially at fair value plus transaction cost. So this is also consistent to what we have learned in the previous lesson. But just remember that for financial assets held for trading, the initial measurement shall be the fair value and the transaction cost shall be expensed outright. So for investment in unquoted equity instruments, what we're going to do for this type of investment is that although per PFRS 9, we are really required to measure the equity instruments at fair value. However, in the case of unquoted equity instruments, since wala tayong um, reliable basis of our fair value, then we can just measure them at cost. So kung magkano mo siya binili, for example, um, ganun yung iyong pag-record din or pag-measure din ng iyong investment in equity securities. Now, these are the usual transactions related to equity investment. So, regardless of what type of or what is the classification of your investment or equity investment, basta equity investment yan, ito yung mga usual transactions na related to your equity investment. So, una yung acquisition. Of course, here you would um, be conscious of at what amount should your investment be recognized. No, yung tinatawag natin na initial measurement. So kapag merong sale, for example, are we going to recognize gain or loss? Now, kapag equity investment yan, then it is really possible that you'll be receiving dividends from the corporation that you're investing with. So it could be in the form of cash dividend, property dividend, or liquidating dividend, or a stock dividend. So we will discuss each one of them in later in this particular video. Also, there is a possibility of a share split. So we also discuss this later. Special assessment, redemption of share. Kasi diba kapag ang corporation ay i-call in na niya or um, i-redeem na niya, ay bibilhin niya ulit yung share ng investor. And the last one will be stock rights. So again, ito yung mga usual transactions na ma-encounter natin kapag meron tayong investments in equity securities. So, i-discuss natin sila one by one. So, related to acquisition, so usually, di ba, yung pag-acquire natin ng investment ay cash basis tayo. Usually, isang security yung bibili natin or isang investment bibili natin, no? And then we pay cash. So, wala tayong problema kapag cash ang binayad natin, no? Kasi, of course, your cost or your transaction price or your fair value will just be equivalent to your transaction price. However, there are other ways also of acquiring assets. So, one of which is yung acquisition by exchange. So if ever you acquire your investment by exchange, no, nagkambyo, imuhang other asset, imong isa ka asset, gi-exchange siya og investment, for example. So hindi cash ang binayad mo, but other asset din. Now, if you acquired your investment by exchange, ito yung ating pag-determine ng initial measurement natin. So, our acquisition cost, which of course our basis of um, measuring initially our investment, shall be determined by reference to the following in order of priority. So una, fair value of asset given. So yan, no, i-check natin kung magkano yung fair value ng asset na give up natin in exchange of that investment. So kung hindi yan given, kung hindi yan available, yung fair value ng asset given, then we make reference to the fair value of the asset to receive. So meaning, magkano yung fair value ng investment na na-receive natin. Kung wala rin itong number 2, then dito na yung last option natin, yung carrying amount ng asset given. No? So, you make reference to at what amount did you recognize na this asset in your record. So, pila man imo ang carrying amount ani nga asset per books or per record of the entity. So, for sure, na yun ay carrying amount of the asset given. So another concern, no, in relation to acquisition is that what if, no, you're able to acquire the investment in a lump sum price? You acquired 2 or more securities, pero single cost lang siya. So isa lang yung basket price siya, no, or lump sum yung price. So what we're going to do here is the single cost shall be allocated to the securities acquired based on their fair value. So if you can still recall the relative sales price method of allocating the basket price, no, that we have discussed in the inventory na topic, it's just the same here, no. So we're going to refer, no, i-check natin magkano ba ang fair value ng security na to when they are purchased alone. So based on that, you formulate a fraction out of the balances or the market value or the fair value of those securities that you have purchased. So yung fraction na yun, imo-multiply natin sa single cost or sa lump sum cost para ma-breakdown natin or ma-allocate natin yung single or lump sum amount, no, doon sa 2 or more securities that you purchased. Now, what if hindi available ang lahat ng fair market value? So just take note that if only one security has known market value, so what you're going to do is that an amount is allocated to the security with a known market value equal to its market value. So ibig sabihin, say for example, the total basket price is 100,000. So ang meron lang market value is yung security 1. No? So security 1, for example, has a market value of 60,000. So yung 60,000 na yun, unahin na nating allocate yan kay security 1. So yung sobrang 40,000, no, by virtue of or by default, no, yung residual na yun, yung sobra na yun, ay mapupunta na lahat kay security number 2. So that is what is meant here, na i-allocate first the amount ng equivalent to its market value para sa security na merong known na market value. So yung sobra, i-allocate na natin sa security na walang known market value. So that is if lump sum no, or basket price ang pagkabili ng mga securities or investment. Now, what if merong sale of equity security? So, ito usual naman, di ba? Kasi investment to, so you really have the intention of selling it in the near future if maka-advantage na or advantage na para sa entity. So, pag meron sale ng equity security, what you have to do is, of course, you have to recognize gain or loss on sale. So, take note, this is a realized gain or loss. So how do we establish the gain or loss on sale of equity security? So you just compare the consideration that you receive versus the carrying amount of your financial asset. So yung difference, example, your consideration na receive is 100,000 tapos ang carrying amount lang ng financial asset mo ay 80,000. So ibig sabihin meron kang sale or gain on sale amounting to 20,000. So pag of course mas malaki yung consideration received compared sa carrying amount, then most probably meron tayong gain on sale. Otherwise, pag mas maliit ito compared sa carrying amount, then meron tayong loss on sale. So when securities are of the same class, acquired on different dates, at different cost, so the cost of the sold security shall be determined using either FIFO or average cost approach. So still what we learned in inventory na topic is applicable also in investment. Kasi 'di ba, for example, um, meron kang sale transaction, tapos prior to that sale transaction, marami kang purchases ng marami kang binili, no, or there was a series of acquisition ng investment in the prior periods. So mamomroblema ka ngayon kung magkano yung cost na i-assign natin doon sa investment. So again, if that's the case, then we should apply FIFO or average cost approach. So pag hindi na mention, usually ang gagamitin natin ay FIFO approach, no? Pag walang na-mention sa problem kung anong method ang gagamitin mo pag-assign ng cost ng securities mo. Okay. So this is the next thing that you have to discuss na kapag ang discussion or ang topic ay about equity securities, then hindi talaga mawawala itong dividends. So as we know that dividends is a form of profit distribution, no, sa corporation. So if you can still recall this one, this is a setup, 'di ba? Kapag nag-declare ang corporation ng dividend. Say, ito na-discuss natin ito nung accounting 1 or ACC 111. Na? So, a corporation, for example, magde-declare yan siya ng dividends para sa mga investors or shareholders. So, si corporation, di ba, meron yung tatlong important dates no, na ating um, i-consider kapag meron tayong dividends. So first is date of declaration. The date of declaration, so kung corporation ka, yan yung date na magde-debit ka ng retained earnings and magre-recognize ka ng liability. In case na cash dividends yan. Date of record is ito yung date kung saan ipa-finalize mo ngayon yung listing, no? Kung sino ang makakatanggap ng dividends. And of course, yung date of payment, yun yung date kung kailan ka magdi-disburse na ng dividends mo. So that's in the point of view of a corporation. So again, this was our discussion in ACC 111. So ngayon, since we are accounting in the point of view of the investor or the shareholder, sa ito naman na point of view ang ating ire-recognize or ire-record. So kapag tayo ay investor or shareholder class, tapos nag-declare ng dividends ang corporation kung saan tayo merong investment, so what you have to do is you recognize, of course, your cash dividends receivable and you recognize dividend income. So take note ha, this is, here we have to recognize dividend income. So, ang date of record, wala rin tayong journal entry kasi di ba magkaantay lang naman tayo na mapasama doon sa listahan kung sino ang um, entitled to receive the dividends on the date of payment. And then lastly, yung date of payment natin, of course, makaka-receive na tayo ng cash and we have to recognize our cash dividends receivable. So again, we are accounting here in the point of view of the investor or the shareholder. Okay, going back here. So kapag sabi dito, no, ano bang treatment ng cash dividends specifically? Kasi cash dividend is the most common form of dividends na that corporations usually declare. So, ano yung ating concept no or provisions per standard as regard to cash dividends? So, as to cash dividends, if the securities that are measured at fair value through profit or loss or fair value through OCI or at cost. No? So, dividends earned are considered as income. No? So, take note ha, kapag FBPL or FBOCI or at cost, no, in the case of unquoted equity securities, kapag meron tayo na-receive na dividends, we have to recognize it as income. So ito yung ating entry no pag mag-recognize tayo ng income. So when the cash dividends are earned but not received, so usually this is the time when the board of directors make the declaration or dividend declaration or announce no the dividend payment or declares dividend. So pag nag-declare ng dividend ang board of directors, so the investor or the shareholder has to recognize your dividends receivable and credit dividend income. So the date of declaration is the date when the shareholder will be recognizing the dividend income. Okay? Tapos pagdating ng date of payment, so ito na yung ating entry. Magde-debit tayo ng cash, magka-credit tayo ng dividends receivable. So again, no, you just have to recap or review the important dates, no, na related or relative to the declaration or dividends. So sabi dito, when daw the dividends are considered earned? So as I have mentioned kanina, when the board of directors declare the dividends, so meaning on the date of declaration, ang mga shareholder ay pwede nang mag-recognize ng dividend income. Okay? So we have here an example. No? The board of directors at their meeting on November 15, 2015 declared an annual dividend on ordinary share of 5 pesos payable on January 30, 2016 to shareholders of record at the close of business on January 15, 2016. So if you're going to identify, our date of declaration here is noong November 15, 2015. Yung atong date of record is January 15, 2016, whereas the date of payment is January 30, 2016. So now, why is it important no, na malaman natin yung kailan yung date of declaration, kailan yung date of record, kailan yung date of payment. So as investor, as shareholder who will be receiving dividends, ito siya importante sa class because you would know, no, based dito sa date na to, you would know kung kailan mako-consider as dividend on or ex-dividend ang shares natin. So ano bang ibig sabihin nito? Pag sinabi nating dividend on class, ang ibig sabihin niyan that yung from the date of declaration until the date of record, kapag nabenta mo ang iyong um, share no, within this date of declaration until date of record, your shares are selling dividend on. So, ibig sabihin, kapag binenta mo yung share, kasama na mabebenta, no, kasama na mabebenta yung dividend, the right to receive the dividends attached to your share. Kasi as of this dates, yung date of declaration until date of record, the dividends and the share are inseparable. No? So, dili sila pwede mabulag. Once you sell your share, you're also selling your right to receive the dividends. So, yan, no? Kapag dividend on. Now, from the date of record naman until the date of payment, shares are now considered ex-dividend. So, yun ang ibig sabihin ng ex-dividend. So, ibig sabihin, pag ex-dividend na class, yung right to receive the dividend and yung share natin ay pwede nang ma-separate. So, for example, if you are going to sell your shares, um, after the date of record, ibig sabihin, kahit na nabenta mo na yung shares mo, you will still be receiving the dividends. No? Kasi ikaw yung naka-record, no? Ikaw yung nasama, ikaw yung nalista doon sa um, corporation, no, kung sino yung tatanggap ng dividend. So take note, 'di ba, yung date of record natin, ito yung date kung kailan magfa-finalize ng listing ang corporation kung sino-sino yung makakatanggap ng dividends. So for example, kung as of date of record, nasa iyo pa ang share, of course, ikaw yung malilista na makaka-receive ng dividends. So, say for example, after date of record, binenta mo na yung iyong share. So, that's already ex-dividend. So, meaning, you are not selling, kapag tapos na yung date of record, you will still be receiving dividends from the corporation even if hindi mo na hawak yung shares. Kasi nga, ikaw yung naka-record na and the shares now are selling um, ex-dividend. Okay? So, yan yung importance na ng mga date of declaration, date of record, and date of payment in the point of view of the investor or shareholder. Okay, so meron tayong illustration dito. So what if a shareholder owns 1,000 shares costing 100,000? Subsequently, the shareholder receives a notice of dividend declaration of 5 pesos per share or 5,000. So prior to the date of record, the shareholder sells the investment for 150,000. So take note, prior to the date of record. So after the declaration of the dividend but before the record date. So meaning dividends are the shares here are still selling dividend on. So ibig sabihin, um, pag binenta niya or yung binenta niya yung shares, no, during this time, they are also selling or the shareholder is also selling his right to receive the dividend. So kaya yung amount na 150,000 na to, yung selling price niya na 150,000 na, this amount here includes the dividend of 5,000. So parang para bang in advance na niya, kinuha na niya, no, from the new owner, no, so yung bagong yung buyer ng shares. So magde-debit siya ngayon ng cash amounting to 150,000. Credit siya ng investment in equity securities at cost, which is 100,000. Credit yung dividend income na 5,000. So again, pag dividend on ang kanyang share, ibig sabihin nun, kasamang binayaran ng buyer ang dividend na makukuha niya. Kasi 'di ba yung since before sa date of record, binenta mo na yung share. So malamang yung tatanggap ngayon ng dividends is yung bagong owner na. No? So yung buyer na. So itong si old na owner, no, or sa original owner, so ang gagawin niya na lang ay i-add up niya na lang doon sa selling price, no? Parang i-advance na niya, no? Bibilhin na niya or pagbabayarin niya si buyer, no, sa income or sa dividend income na marireceive niya um, kapag of course nagbayad na yung corporation. So kaya nag-credit tayo dito ng dividend income na 5,000. And then yung sobra, meron tayong gain on sale of investment. So yan, no? Kasi this is selling dividend one. So most probably yung selling price natin, inclusive na yan doon sa dividend sana matatanggap natin. Kaso lang hindi natin hinintay, di ba, na mag-date of record na. So that's why we are just adding it up to our selling price. Kasi ang makakatanggap na nito is yung company na, is yung bagong owner na, no, yung buyer ng ating investment or ang ating securities. Okay, so another kind, no, or type of dividend is itong property dividend. So it's not also uncommon, no, or common lang din, no, na, or it is also possible that the corporation will be paying instead of cash, ang ibabayad niya or ang i-declare niya as dividends is in the form of property or yung tinatawag natin na property dividends or dividend in kind. So, dividends, these are dividends in the form of property or non-cash assets. So, ano yung importante dito sa property dividend? So, kung tayo yung nakatanggap, yung pinaka-concern natin dito is, at what amount am I going to recognize my property dividend? So, ang sabi dito, you have to recognize it as an income at fair value. So, for example, no, ide-debit mo lang yung kano yung natanggap mong non-cash asset and then magka-credit ka ng income. So take note at fair value of the non-cash asset that you receive. So we have here an example, no? X company distributes its holding for 10,000 or of 10,000 shares in Y company as property dividend. So si X company ngayon, ito yung nag-declare ng property dividend. So yung dineclare niya ay ang investment niya kay Y company. So, yun, property dividend yun. Kasi, hindi mo naman own shares yan, no? So, the shares of Y company have a market value of 100 per share. A shareholder receives 500 shares of Y company as a property dividend from X company. So, the property dividend is recorded as, so since ito, point of view ito ng shareholder, no, na nakatanggap ng 500 shares of Y company as property dividend. So, magde-debit tayo investment in equity security. Investment in equity securities, 500 shares times 100 pesos, which is the market value per share. So you have 50,000. And then yung credit dividend income at 50,000. Kasi ang sabi natin, kung babalikan natin, di ba sabi dito, yung property dividend natin ay i-record natin as income using the fair value at the time of course, ito, declaration. So you have 100 pesos man yung fair value or market value ng property dividends na na-receive ng shareholder. So ito yung basis natin sa pag-recognize ng dividend income. Okay, so debit lang tayo ng investment in equity securities, credit ng dividend income. Kasi dito, ang property dividend is in the form of investment in Y company. We have another example here. So what if the property dividends is in the form of merchandise inventory? So example, an entity declares 100 pesos worth of merchandise inventory for every one share. So if a shareholder owns 500 shares, then that's 500 times 100 pesos. So the dividend in the form of merchandise would be 50,000 pesos. So the property dividend is recorded as a debit to merchandise inventory kasi yan yung natanggap mo um, at 50,000 and then credit dividend income at 50,000. So again, we based the amount that we recognize as dividend income on the fair value of the asset or the non-cash asset that we receive. Another concept or another type or another form of dividends is itong tinatawag nating liquidating dividends. So take note, usually kapag dividends class, that is return on investment. So di ba parang income yan. But take note, kapag liquidating dividend yan, that represents return of, take note of that word, no? Return of investment or return of invested capital. And therefore, it is not considered income. So unlike doon sa cash dividend, saka sa property dividend. So yung liquidating dividends may be also in the form of cash or non-cash asset. So kapag tayo ay nakatanggap ng liquidating dividends, tanawa ang atong entry. We debit cash or other appropriate account and then we credit investment in equity security. So in short, you are recognizing the return of your invested capital kasi credit mo yung asset account mo. Okay, so hindi yan income but a return of capital, no, or return of investment. So in contrast to dividends na cash or property, nga ang tawag natin ay return on capital or in return on investment. Okay. Now, for liquidating dividends, these are normally paid when the corporation is dissolved or liquidated. Yan, no? Pag nag-close na yung ating corporation, usually dyan yan magbibigay ng liquidating dividends. No? Pag meron pang natira para sa mga shareholders. However, for wasting assets corporation or mining entity, so ito sila mga special sila, no? Kasi liquidating dividends may be paid even before the dissolution or liquidation. Kasi class, meron tayong tinatawag na trust fund doctrine. If you can still recall in accounting 111, we discussed it there that etong mga corporations, generally, bawal sila return ng legal capital sa mga owners, no, or sa mga shareholders during the lifetime of the corporation. Pero pag ang pinag-uusapan natin ay wasting asset company or itong mga mining entity, take note class that they are allowed to pay, no, to pay or to return capital, no, even if it is a legal capital. Bakit? Kasi itong mga wasting asset corporation na to, ang nature ng kanilang business is that um, mag-stop talaga sila mag-operate kapag wala nang ma-extract na mineral resources or yung tinatawag natin na wasting asset. So in short, hindi forever yung operations no, ng entity or ng corporation or yung wasting asset corporation. And that is why in anticipation na baka hindi nga siya ganun katagal pang mag-operate. So, kaya pwede nang magsauli no, ng part ng legal capital. Again, that is if wasting asset lang because of the nature of their business. Kasi di ba pag wasting asset yan, medyo matagal pa, if not another lifetime na ma-replace, no, ma-replace yung wasting assets na na-extract na ng corporation. Like for example, gold, di ba? So it would take another lifetime before maka-form na naman ng gold. So pag once naubos yan, so nauubos talaga. So meaning magsa-stop na ng operation yung entity. So accordingly, no, because of that nature, kasi 'di ba sabi dito, pag wasting asset corporation or mining entity, ang liquidating dividends may be paid even before the solution. For again, the reason is that hindi nga hindi for hindi hindi tatagal no or magsa-stop din ang operations ng wasting asset corporation pag naubos na nilang ma-extract yung mga natural resources. So accordingly, when dividends are received from a wasting asset corporation, the dividends are designated as party income and party return of capital. So when the liquidating dividends exceed the cost of the investment, so sobra yung natanggap ng shareholder, then the difference is credited to gain on investment. On the other hand, if it is not fully recovered, then the balance is written off as a loss. Okay, so yun yung ating mga liquidating dividends. Okay, so the last um, form of dividends is itong tinatawag natin na stock dividends. So, ito possible din, 'di ba, na ang ibibigay na dividends ng corporation is in the form of their own shares. So, own share ng corporation, dineclare nila as dividends. Ang tawag dyan ay stock dividend or share dividend. IAS, term niya ay bonus issue. So just take note that unlike cash dividends, unlike property dividend, yung stock dividends natin class is not considered an income. So take note, hindi yan income, no? Ano bang effect ng stock dividends? So, ang effect lang ng stock dividend is ang shareholder makaka-receive ng additional shares but still has the same proportional equity interest in the entity. So the effect is that pag merong stock dividends, um, tataas lang ang number of shares ng shareholder, tapos magde-decrease ang kanyang market value or yung um, price per unit or per share niya. So again, pag stock dividend yan, ang effect is mag increase ang number of shares with a corresponding decrease in the cost of the share. Okay? So there are two kinds of stock dividends. One is same as those held. So for example, if you're holding ordinary shares and then naka-receive ka ng stock dividend na ordinary shares din. So that is same of those held. The other one is different from those held. So ibig sabihin, example, you have been holding ordinary shares pero ang dineclare na dividends ay preference shares na ng entity. So that is different from those held. So why is it important to identify? Because this has bearing in our accounting for stock dividends. No? Magdepende siya kung same as those held ba or different from those held. Now, let's discuss muna stock dividends which are same as those held. So what if ang imo ang na-receive na stock dividend is the same lang sa imong gigunitan nga shares. So take note again that stock dividends are not income, no? They are not considered income. So what you're going to do with that, it will be recorded only by means of memorandum entry. So for example here, no, receive 2,000 shares representing 20% stock dividend and 10,000 original shares held. Shares held now or now held is 12,000 shares. So yun yung example natin sa pag-recognize or paggawa ng memorandum entry in relation to the receipt of stock dividends which is the same as those held. So we have here an illustration, no? Sample, a shareholder receives 20% stock dividend or 2,000 shares. So, ano yung effect nito no, sa investment account ng entity? So, the effect of the stock dividend may be shown as follows. So, for example, the original shares is 10,000. The cost per share is 120. The total cost is 1,200,000. So, nag-declare siya ng 20% stock dividend. So, that's 20% of 10,000. That's 2,000. So, yung stock dividends natin, wala yang value, di ba? Pero, what will happen is that, since naka-receive ka na stock dividend na 2,000, the total number of shares now becomes 12,000. Tapos yung total cost mo, the same pa rin, no, 1.2 million. So ano ba ang affected? So affected ang number of shares, which is nag-increase. And what will happen to your cost per share? It will decrease, no? So from 120 per share, naging 100 per share na lang. So that is 1.2 million divide 12,000. So you have 100 pesos. Okay, so again, dito wala tayong journal entry na gagawin pag ang stock dividends are the same as those held. So what we are going to account lang or i-check lang natin kung magkano na yung bagong cost per share natin. Considering that the total cost will not increase, no? What will increase is your number of shares. Tapos yung cost per share mo, you would expect na bababa siya. In this case, from 120, naging 100 na lang. Okay, next is, what if the stock dividends are different from those held? So, lahi siya, no? Dili pareha sa imuhang gunitan nga shares, no? Or investment. So, the original cost of investment is apportioned between the original shares and the stock dividends on the basis of market value at the date of receipt. So again, take note, no? Pag different para from those held, yung natanggap nating um, stock dividends, then meron na tayong gagawin na journal entry. So ano yung journal entry natin? Dapat merong portion na i-reclassify natin. So, i-reclassify natin ang portion pertaining to the stock dividends, no, based on the market value upon receipt. So, we have here an example. A shareholder owns 10,000 ordinary shares costing 800,000. Subsequently, the shareholder receives 10% stock dividend in the form of preference share. The market value of ordinary share is 150,000 and the market value of preference share is 150 DI and the market value of preference shares is 100. So the original cost is allocated as follows. So yung ating original cost ay that is um 800,000 yung ating original cost, right? So, dapat itong 800,000 na to, dapat i-allocate mo siya sa original shares and doon sa stock dividend na natanggap mo. So, itong example na to, ang original share niya ay ordinary shares. Tapos, yung stock dividend na natanggap niya is in the form of preference share. So, ano yung unang ginawa? No? Inallocate yung 800,000 based on the market value. So, what happened here? No, yung 10,000 na ordinary shares natin, i-multiply natin ng 150 per share, which is yung market value ng ordinary share. So, you have 1.5 million. For the preference share, 1,000 shares yun kasi 10% of 10,000, so that's 1,000 times the market value which is given, no? You have 100 pesos. So you have 100,000. So yung market value natin ay 1.5 million tsaka 100,000, a total of 1.6 million. So based on this market value, gagawa tayo ng fraction. So ito yung fraction. Tapos yung fraction na to, imumultiply natin sa ating total ordinary shares, no, or total cost ng ating ordinary share. So in this case, that's 15 over 16 times 800,000 equals 750,000. Tapos 1 over 16 times 800,000, you have 50,000. So anong ibig sabihin nitong 50,000? Ibig sabihin, class, itong 50,000 na to, ito yung amount na ating i-allocate, no, kay preference share. So you look at the entry. No, upon the receipt of the stock dividend, so ganito yung record natin. Debit natin ang investment in preference shares, 50,000. Credit natin ang investment in ordinary shares at 50,000. No? So in that case, so what will happen? Yung ating investment in preference shares, magkakaroon ng balanse ng 50,000. Whereas our ordinary shares, no, from 800, madededakan siya ng 50,000. So, magiging 750,000 na lang yung ating investment in ordinary shares. Okay, so yun yung ating discussions related sa stock dividends. So, proceed tayo dito, no, sa shares received in lieu of cash dividends. So, ano nangyari dito? Supposedly, ang dineclare na dividends ay cash. Kaso lang, ang na-receive mo ay shares. Na? So, anong treatment natin doon? So, supposedly cash yung um, tinanggap kasi yung cash naman ang dineclare as dividends. Kaso lang, on the date of payment, what happened was you receive shares instead of cash dividends. So, ano yung treatment? So, first is, ito, no, importante. We have to consider the shares that we receive. We recognize that as income at fair value of their shares received because it is, in effect, a property dividend. Okay? So, pag meron tayo na tanggap na shares in lieu of cash dividends or instead of cash dividends, then we have to recognize that as income at fair value of the shares that we receive. Kung wala namang fair value yung shares natin, then the income is just equal to the cash dividends that would have been received. No, kung pila ang tato ato ang cash nga nadawat, kintay wala to giilistan og shares. So meron tayong sample dito, no? A shareholder owns 10,000 shares costing 1 million. Subsequently, the shareholder receives 1,000 shares in lieu of cash dividends of 10 pesos per share. So the market value per share is 150. So to record the receipt of the 1,000 shares, our entry is just to debit investment in equity securities you have 150,000 and credit dividend income of 150,000. Okay, so um, nag-base tayo dito sa ating market value as mentioned in the standard. Now, what if the market value is not available? So it shall be recorded at 100,000, which is the cash dividend that would have been received no kung wala pa to giilistan og share dividends or shares no, wala pa siya giilistan og shares. Now, what if yung cash naman na receive mo instead of stock dividends na? So initially, ang dineclare ng corporation ay stock dividends. Pero yung na-receive mo ay cash naman, no? Baliktad nung kanina. So ano yung treatment natin kapag naka-receive ka ng cash instead of stock dividends? So we have to follow the what we call as if approach. So ano yung as if approach? In this approach, na stock dividends are assumed to be received and subsequently sold at the cash received. No? So, therefore, since nag-assume tayo na na-receive natin yung stocks, tapos binenta lang natin subsequently, therefore, you may recognize gain or loss related to this investment. So, we have here a sample. So, we have here an illustration. So, a shareholder owns 10,000 shares costing 1.1 million. Subsequently, the shareholder receives 150,000 cash in lieu of 1,000 shares, originally declared as 10% stock dividend. So, in the as-if approach, no, so we have here a computation of the cost per share, no, yung bagong cost per share natin. So, originally, ito yung ating shares. No, you have 10,000 shares. Ang value niya, ang total cost niya ay 1.1 million. So, therefore, if that's 1.1 million divide 10,000, yung cost per share natin ay 110. Now, with your stock dividends, you have a total now of 11,000. Yung total cost natin, hindi siya nag-increase, di ba? Still, 1.1 million pa rin yan. So, ang effect niya lang is that ang total cost niya 1.1. So, the same pa rin yung total cost. Ang kaibahan ng A, naging 11,000 yung number of shares. So with that increase in the number of shares, so most probably your cost per share will decrease. So that's 1.1 million divide 11,000. So that's 100. Now, itong 100 na to class, ito na yung magiging basihan mo pag-compute sa as-if sale natin. No? So, since we are assuming no, that the shares were received initially and then these shares were sold, no, these shares were sold. So we have to establish, of course, the cost. So first is you to record no, the receipt of cash in lieu of the stock dividend. So what you have to do is you debit first your cash. So the amount is 150,000. Tapos, you credit investment in equity securities for the amount of your investment. So, paano kinumpit yung 100,000? This is, di ba, 1,000 na shares na stock dividend natin, i-multiply natin sa ating cost per share after the stock dividend, which is 100. So, that's 1,000 shares times 100. You will have 100,000. So, since sobra yung natanggap mong pera compared sa cost ng ng shares natin, so nagkaroon tayo or nag-recognize tayo ng gain on investment amounting to 50,000. So yeah, no, the as if approach. We have the other one, no? We have the BIR approach. So under the BIR approach class, no, lahat ng na-receive mong cash ay i-credit mo lang to dividend income. Kasi per BIR kasi, all cash that you receive, no, whether it is originally from cash dividend or stock dividend, it is recognized as income. So under the BIR approach, what you're going to do is you just debit it to cash na at 150,000 and credit dividend income. So just take note that what approach to follow. So the as if approach is theoretically sound and should be followed for accounting purposes. So yung as if approach ang ating ifa-follow for accounting purposes. Okay, so we're done with stock dividends. So let us now proceed to another um, topic or another possible transaction affecting your investment in equity securities. So we have here share split. So ano ba yung share split? So a share split is a means of restructuring the capital of a corporation by effecting a change in the number of shares without capitalizing the retained earnings or changing the amounts of its legal capital. So, take note no na itong share split na to will affect your number of shares, no, your cost per share, but it will not affect your total capitalization. No? So, um, etong share split na to may be in the form of split up or split down. No? So ano ba yung ibig sabihin ng split up? So kapag sinabi nating split up, this is a transaction whereby the outstanding shares are called in and replaced by a larger number of shares, no? Accompanied by reduction in the par value or stated value of each share. No? So we have an example. So if a shareholder owns 10,000 shares and the share is split up 5 for 1, so the shareholder receives 50,000 new shares in exchange for the 10,000 original shares. Kasi ba, ano bang ibig sabihin nito? Ibig sabihin, di ba ito yung original na number of shares owned by the entity or by the shareholder. Now, pagdating ng split up, no, for every one share held daw, ay bibigyan siya ng 5 shares. So, yung isang share niya, magiging 5. So, that is 10,000 shares, multiply natin siya by 5. So, the effect is, nag-increase ang number of shares mo from 10,000, naging 50,000 na siya because of the share split or specifically the split up. So again, the effect is mag-increase ang number of shares, mag-reduce ang par value or stated value of the share. Now, what about the split down? Yung baliktad naman ng split up, no? Yung split down. Split down naman is the reverse of the split up. So in this particular transaction, outstanding shares are called in and replaced by a smaller number of shares. It is accompanied by increase in the par value or stated value of each share. So example, so if a shareholder owns 10,000 shares and the share is split down 5 for 1, so ibig sabihin, for every 5 shares na meron ng isang shareholder ay i-replace yun ng isa. No? So in short, yung 10,000 natin, i-divide natin siya by 5. So, para yung 10,000 ay i-divide natin ng 5. So, ibig sabihin ang bagong shares na lang ay 2,000 shares na lang in exchange for the 10,000. So, what is the effect? Pag split down pala, ang effect is kukonti yung number of shares natin and then ang par value natin ay mag-i-increase. Kasi take note class na itong share split, it will not affect the total cost of the investment. Ang effect lang nito ay magde-decrease lang or mag-i-increase ang cost per share because of the total cost will now be applied to a larger or smaller number of shares. So, yun lang. No? But in terms of total, wala siyang effect. So, meron lang siyang effect sa number of shares and the par value or the cost per share. So, pag meron tayong share split, take note no, wala tayong journal entry. What you have to do is to just prepare a memorandum entry to record the receipt of new shares by virtue of share split. So, meron tayong example nito. So, a shareholder owns 10,000 shares costing 2 million. So, subsequently, the shareholder receives a notice that the share is split 2 for 1. So, the receipt of the new share is recorded as follows. So, from 10,000, magiging 20,000 na siya kasi 2 for 1 man. So, um, to record that in a memorandum entry, you have to just, of course, no, memo entry lang siya. Ito yung sample. So, receive 20,000 new shares as a result of a 2 for 1 split of 10,000 original shares. So, the cost per share before the share split, you have 2 million divided 10,000 shares, that's 100 per share. Pero after the share split, what will happen? Yung 2 million natin, i-divide na by 20,000 shares. So from 200, magiging 100 per share na lang ang cost ng ating share. Okay, so we're done with the share split. So proceed na tayo dito sa special assessment. So this is the third to the last na topic natin. So special assessment, ano bang nature nito? Yung special assessments class, this is an additional capital contributions of the shareholders. So on the part of the shareholder, it is recorded as additional cost of the investment, whereas on the part of the entity, this is considered as share premium. So we have here an example, no? A shareholder owns 10,000 shares costing 500,000. So subsequently, the directors or the board of directors pass a resolution to the effect that shareholders shall contribute 5 pesos for each share held to the corporation. So on the part of the shareholder, the payment shall be recorded as follows. So you debit investment in equity securities. Bakit 50,000? Because 10,000 yung shares na na-own ng shareholder, tapos tag 5 pesos each man daw, so you have 50,000. And then credit cash of 50,000. So this is special assessment. So there is just an increase, no, in the cost of your investment. Next is, this one is the second to the last topic na redemption of share. So this is common. Itong redemption of shares na to, this is very common, especially for preference shares. Because preference shares may be called in for redemption and cancellation by the entity issuing them. So in short, parang bibilhin lang, no, ulit ng corporation na nag-issue ng preference shares na to. So i-call in nila or i-redeem nila ang shares ng investor. So on the part of the shareholder, ano yung treatment? So the redemption is recorded in the same manner as the sale of share. So the redemption price is treated as a sales price, no? So parang para ka lang nagbenta. Na if you are the shareholder, so your treatment is ibebenta mo yung shares mo doon sa issuing corporation din. Example, if a shareholder acquires 10,000 preference shares for 100 per share, the entry is magde-debit siya ng investment in preference shares 1 million, credit siya ng cash. Now, what if subsequent to this, no, pagkatapos niyang bumili or nag-acquire ng preference shares, what if these preference shares are called in, no, by the issuing entity at 110 per share? So that's 110 times 10,000. So makaka-receive ka ng cash amounting to 1,100,000. So since sabi natin ang redemption is iti-treat lang natin siya as sale. So you have to establish how much is the cost para ma-compute mo magkano ang gain or loss on the investment. So here, the investment in preference shares will be credited at cost, which is 1 million. So yan. So sobra tayo ng 100,000. So that 100,000 will be credited as a gain on investment. No? So simple as that. After this entry, itong entry na to, maka-close na or mazi-zero out na yung investment in preference shares natin. Okay, so this is the last topic for this particular lesson. We have stock right. So ano ba yung stock right? So ito very common din, kapag meron kang equity investment, it is really possible na makaka-receive ka ng stock right. So ano ba yung stock right? The other term for this is the preemptive right. If you can still recall, no, sa accounting 1, lahat ng mga shareholders ay meron tinatawag na preemptive right. So ano ba tong preemptive right? This is the legal right, no, granted to shareholders to subscribe for new shares issued by a corporation at a specified price during a definite period. So this will happen if the corporation will be issuing new shares. So dapat i-offer niya, initially i-offer niya yan sa mga existing na shareholder. So what is the reason? The reason is that i-offer niya muna sa mga existing na shareholder para preserve, no, ng mga existing shareholders ang kanilang equity interest in the corporation. So para ano lang, no, para um if they, although of course it's not it's in the option of the shareholder. It is possible that they avail it. It is also possible that they will not avail it. Pero they are given, of course, the stock right. Automatic yan. Now, the stock right is inherent in every share. So, ibig sabihin, pag meron kang isang share, pag mag-declare ng stock right or magbibigay ng stock rights ang corporation or pag merong issuance no yung corporation na bagong shares, meron kang stock right niyan, isang stock right din. No? So, depende na lang kung ano yung terms ng corporation. Like for example, pag sinabi niyang makakabili ka ng isang share, uh, paying this much of money plus exercising how many number of stock rights, no? Um, so depende na lang 'yan sa corporation. So the IAS, no, or the International Accounting Standards term for stock right is right issue. So a stock right is valuable to the shareholder because the price at which the new shares are sold is generally below the prevailing market price. So ito yung sinasabi natin, 'di ba, na favorable on the part of the entity or in the shareholder because um, mas advantage kung bibili sila ng stock using a stock right. Simply because the purchase price or the subscription price of this stocks, no, or shares kapag ginamitan mo ng stock right ay mas mababa compared sa prevailing market price. So take note that stock right is evidenced by a share warrant. Okay? So there are two schools of thoughts in accounting for stock right. One is sinasabi na dapat daw ang stock right i-account natin separately. The other one is saying na dapat hindi natin i-account separately ang stock right. So ano ba talaga, no? Ano ba talaga ang dapat nating gawin? I-account ba natin separately or hindi natin siya i-account separately? Actually, this matter is still not settled or not well settled sa standards natin, no? Hindi pa siya fully hindi pa siya fully settled, hindi pa siya resolved. No? So there is still this debate kung ano ba yung gagawin, no? I-account ba natin separately or hindi natin i-account separately. So anyway, no, we will just discuss kung ano bang gagawin pag i-account mo separately and kung hindi mo siya i-account separately. So unahin na natin yung i-account natin separately, no? So if stock rights are to be accounted for separately. So bakit? No? Ito yung kanyang um, mga reasons, no, kung bakit dapat i-account separately ang ating stock right. So since stock right daw is a form of equity instrument, then it shall be measured initially at fair value in accordance with the provision of PFRS 9. Kasi 'di ba sabi sa PFRS 9, lahat ng mga equity instrument, i-measure natin 'yan at fair value. So based on that, provision in PFRS 9. So that is why since stock right is a form of equity instrument, dapat lang na i-account natin siya separately and it shall be measured initially at fair value. Hence, a portion of the carrying amount of the original investment in equity securities is allocated to the stock right at an amount equal to the fair value of the stock rights at the time of acquisition. So take note class ha, na um, in this context, if the stock rights are accounted separately, so ang gagawin natin, kukuha tayo ng portion sa carrying amount ng original investment para i-allocate natin doon sa stock right. And our basis will be the fair value of the stock right at the time of acquisition. So take note, stock rights are classified as current assets. Okay. So, yun yung kapag i-account natin separately, no? Maglalagay tayo ng amount talaga para sa stock right. Now, what if hindi siya i-account separately? So, ito naman yung kanyang mga reason, no? Kung bakit sinasabi niya na dapat hindi na i-account ng stock right separately. So, ito yung kanyang mga reasons, no? Kung bakit hindi na dapat i-account separately ang stock right. So, ang sinasabi dito na ang stock right daw is an embedded derivative. Pero hindi siya standalone derivative. So, ano ba yung derivative? Derivative is something or an item na nakadepende lang yung value niya sa isang item din. So, yung sinasabi niyang embedded derivative, so of course, stock right is an embedded derivative. Bakit? Um, Kasi wala namang magiging stock right kung walang host contract which is yung share, no? So kung walang share, hindi ka magkakaroon ng stock right. Kung wala kang existing na share, hindi ka magkakaroon ng stock right. So that's why stock right is an embedded derivative of a stock. So pag sinabi natin embedded derivative, it is a component of a hybrid or a combined contract, which we call the host contract. In our example, yun yung share, with the effect that some of the cash flows of the combined contract vary in a way similar to a standalone derivative. So, imagine na lang, no? Bakit tinatawag na embedded derivative ang stock right? It's because walang stock right kung walang share. So, pag walang share, walang stock right, no? So, initially, kaya meron kang stock right kasi meron kang share. Now, ano dito, yung sinasabi nila na hindi na dapat i-account separately yung ating stock right from the share. It's because based daw sa PFRS 9, ang embedded derivative shall be separated from the host contract and accounted for separately under certain conditions only, no? So, now, that certain conditions, na-mention pa niya dito na if the it further provides na that if the host contract daw is within the scope of PFRS 9, then the classification requirement shall be applied to the combined host contract in its entirety. So since the host contract is a financial asset, which is of course yung share natin, yung equity instrument natin na ordinary share ba or ordinary share, then the embedded derivative is not separately accounted na daw. Kasi since the financial asset, yung equity instrument naman ay um, ina-account natin using the provision of PFRS 9. So bale parang covered na doon yung ating stock rights. So kaya ang kanilang kina-claim is dapat hindi na daw i-separate na pag-account or hindi na i-account separately ang ating stock right. Now, we have an example here of a formal announcement of a stock right now. Let's proceed to accounting, no? Accounting na tayo. So, we have here the board of directors in their meeting on December 15, 2015 approved to issue stock rights to the shareholders of record on January 15, 2016, entitling the shareholders to acquire one share at 100 par for every 5 shares held. So, the right to expire on March 31, 2016. So, the date of declaration is yung December 15. The date of record is in January 15, and the date of expiration is yung March 31. Um, Now, bakit importante ulit yung date of the declaration, date of record, and date or expiration date? Because class, no, just like your dividends, when um, the shares or the shares, no, are selling right on between the date of declaration and date of record. Anong ibig sabihin nun? Pag sinabi nating right on, um, ang shares natin ay pwede nating mabenta or hindi natin pwedeng mabenta without selling also the rights. So kasi from the date of declaration and the date of record, the shares are still selling right on. So meaning the shares and the rights, the stock rights are inseparable. No, hindi siya hindi siya separate. So therefore, they are treated as one. No, pag binenta mo yung share mo, kasama mo nang nabenta ang rights. So walang problema because the stock rights are not yet received, no, by the shareholder. So in the event of subsequent sale, no, prior to the record date, the difference between the selling price and the carrying amount is simply considered as gain or loss on investment. Now, if the shares na are selling ito, X right, so kailan yan? Between the date of record and the expiration date, the shares are now selling X right. So ano ibig sabihin? Ibig sabihin that ang share can now be sold separately or separate, no, from its right or vice versa. So, pwede mo na mabenta separate ang stock right sa share or ang share separately from the stock right. Na. So, that is X right na. So, still based on the concept na similar lang dun sa concept ng dividend on tsaka X dividend. Na kapag wala pang date of record, of course, no, if you are going to sell your share, you're also selling along with it the rights, not the stock rights. Pero pag nabenta mo na siya after the date of record, so ikaw naman yung record, no, na makakatanggap ng stock rights. So meaning, you can separately sell it from the share. Na kasi natanggap mo na yung stock rights. So, meron tayong example dito. So, what if no, between the date of declaration and the date of record? So, the right, again, no, the right and the share are inseparable and are treated as one in this case. So, again, ito yung case na the shares are selling right on. So, we have here an example. A shareholder owns 5,000 shares costing 500,000. Subsequently, the shareholder receives notice of stock rights to subscribe for 1,000 shares at par value of 100 per share. Prior to the issuance of the share warrants, the shareholder sells the investment for 750,000. So, hindi pa umabot yung date of record. So, hindi pa man umabot yung date of record, tapos binenta na niya at 750,000. So, anong gagawin? Record lang siya, of course, ng cash, no, for the amount na na-receive, 750,000. Credit lahat ng investment kasi 'di ba right on pa ito. So, when you're going to sell the shares, you're also selling the stock rights. No? So, hindi pa natin siya in-account separately. So, you have um, 500,000 credit to investment in equity securities. And then, credit tayo no, ng gain on sale of investment for the difference of 250,000. Now, between the date of record and expiration date, what will happen? So the shares now can be sold separately from the right. So ito na yung tinatawag natin na X right. So we have here an illustration. So assuming no that a shareholder acquired again 10,000 shares costing 1.8. Tapos subsequently the shareholder received 10,000 stock rights, so subscribe new shares at 100 per share for every 5 share or for every 5 rights held. So the market value is 150 and the market value of the share is 150. The market value of the um, right is 10 pesos. So if you are going to record the transaction, so unang-una ito, this is your entry sa original investment. So when you acquired the shares na 10,000 with a cost of 1.8, ito yung entry natin. Debit tayo ng invested in equity securities, credit tayo ng cash na at 1.8. Next to that, i-record natin yung pagkatanggap natin ng stock rights. Kasi 'di ba dapat i-separate na natin ng pag-account ang stock rights since na-receive na natin siya kasi after the date of record na. So, debit tayo ng stock rights, that's 10,000 times 10 pesos. Saan galing yung 10 pesos? So, take note, sabi natin, ang stock rights should be measured at fair value on the date of acquisition. So, pagkatanggap natin ng stock right, measure natin siya at fair values. In this case, binigay na, no? The market value of the right is 10 pesos. How many stock rights are there? You have 10,000 stock rights kasi meron tayong 10,000 shares, no? So yeah, that's 10,000 stock rights times 10. So yung value ng stock rights natin ay 100,000. Now, take note, ang credit natin ay invested in equity securities na 100,000. So ano ibig sabihin? Meaning class, sa atong original no, na investment in equity securities na 1.8, 100,000 of that amount is debited or allocated na to stock rights. Okay? So, inallocate na siya to stock rights. So, you have, ito, no, credit tayo ng investment in equity securities na 100,000. Now, if, for example, the shareholder exercise na the stock rights, so ang atin naman i-consider dapat is magkano yung cost of investment. Di ba kapag nag-exercise ng stock right, ibig sabihin, bumili ng bagong shares. So take note na kapag bumili ng bagong shares at in-exercise yung stock right, the cost of the new investment is just equivalent to the subscription price plus the cost of stock rights exercised. So since there are 10,000 stock rights and the investor can acquire one new share for every 5 stock rights, then the investor would acquire 2,000 new shares at 100 per share or 200,000. Kasi based yan dito, no? Sabi niya dito, um, ang shareholder ay nakatanggap ng 10,000 na stock rights to subscribe new shares. 100 per share ang kanyang subscription price for every 5 rights. So, dapat mag-surrender siya ng 5 rights para makabili siya ng isang share. So, with that, 10,000 divided by 5. So, 2,000 new shares lang ang kanyang maa-acquire. So, times 100 per share, that's the subscription price. So, that's a total of 200,000. So, take note no that our new investment, the cost of the new investment is comprised of the cost of the stock right, which is 100,000 plus your um, subscription price. So that's 200,000 plus 100,000. So ito yung entry natin. Debit natin yung bago nating investment in equity securities at 300,000 ang total. That is composed of the subscription price that you paid 200,000 plus yung in-exercise mong stock rights. No? Yung value na in-exercise mong stock rights amounting to 100,000. Okay, what if hindi mo siya in-exercise? No? What if binenta mo siya? Binenta mo for 150,000. So, pag binenta ang stock rights, the entry is to debit, of course, cash. You have 150,000. Credit stock rights at cost na 100,000. Credit gain and sale of stock rights amounting to 50,000. So, ito yung gagawin mo kapag binenta mo yung stock rights. Kasi nga, di ba, um, pwede mo na siya ibenta separately pag X-right na. Now, what if hindi mo siya nabenta, hindi mo rin siya na-exercise, kundi nag-expire na lang siya. So, stock rights can be exercised only up to a certain date, after which the stock rights become worthless. So, pag na-expire ang stock rights, ito naman yung entry natin. Debit tayo ng loss on stock rights, 100,000 at cost yan. Credit tayo ng stock rights na 100,000. Okay? So, ito yung ating ganun natin i-account ng ating stock rights. So again, just a recap, sabi natin, ang stock rights, when accounted for separately, shall be measured at fair value at the date of acquisition. Now, ang problema natin, what if walang available na market value ang ating stock right? So, pag walang available na market value ang stock right class, kailangan natin mag-compute ng tinatawag na theoretical or parity value of stock right. So, this is applicable when the market value of stock right cannot be reliably determined. So, don't you worry because meron tayong formula no, na binigay. So, magdedepende ang pag-compute ng theoretical or parity value kung ang shares ba ay selling right on or are they selling X right. Okay? So, when the share is selling right on, the value of one right is computed as the market value of the share right on minus the subscription price divided by the number of rights to purchase one share plus one. So again, that is if the share is selling right on. Now, if the shares are selling X right na, the value of one right is just equivalent to the market value of the share X right minus the subscription price divided by the number of rights to purchase one share. So, wala nang plus 1 no, dito sa X right. Okay? So, let's have an example. So, meron tayo ditong illustration. So, an shareholder acquired, example, 10,000 shares costing 2.5 million. So, subsequently, the shareholder received stock rights to subscribe for new shares at 150 per share for every 5 rights held. So, the market value of the share right on is 210 per share. So the right has no known market value. So if that's the case, then kung wala tayong known na market value, ang gagawin natin, mag-compute tayo ng theoretical value no, ng stock right. So that is computed as the market value of the share right on minus subscription price divided number of shares to purchase one share plus one. So yung market value ng share right on is 210 pesos. Ito binigay na, 210. Yung subscription price, ayan, di ba? The shareholder receives stock price to subscribe for new share at 150. Meaning, magkano niyang bibilhin ang new shares no, kung in-exercise niya ang kanyang stock rights. So, 150 ang ating subscription price. Divide the number of rights na needed to purchase one share. So, ingon siya dire, 5 rights ang needed no, para makapalit siya isa ka share. So, manang 5 plus 1. So if this is the case, 60 divided by 6, the value of one right is 10 per right. So pag naana kay value sa right, so this is how you're going to allocate the cost of your investment. So the cost of your original investment is 2.5 million. The theoretical value of the stock right is 10,000 stock rights times 10 pesos. Kato na-compute na to na theoretical or parity value. So, the remaining cost of the investment is 2.4 million. So, kung mag-entry ta ani class, ma-debit ta og stock rights nga 100,000, mo-credit tag investment in equity securities na 100,000 pod. Okay, now, what if the market value of the share is, nga 210 is X-rate na to siya, no? What if X-rate to siya? So, kung X-rate to siya, inaniyon po di mo siya pag record or pag-compute sa theoretical or parity value. So, market value of the share X-rate, that's 210, minus subscription price na 150, divided by the number of shares to purchase one share. So, that's 210 minus 150 divided by 5. No? So, that's 12 per right. So, mo pod na akong X right, no? So, unsan pag-allocate? So, kung ang original cost is 2.5 million, niya ang theoretical value of the stock right is 10,000 times 12, that's 120. So, the remaining cost of the original investment is 2,380,000. So, that is our amount, no? Nga ato ang mabilin na lang sa original investment. So, kung i-record nato ni siya, debit tag stock rights nga 120,000, credit tag investment in equity securities nga 2,300,000, meaning 120,000, no? Kaya para ang mabili na lang is 2,380,000. So that is what if the stock rights are accounted for separately. Now, what if hindi natin i-account separately ang stock rights? No? Kasi ito yung isa sa isang school of thought na meron ding mga reasons or meron ding mga backup, no, na justifications kung bakit pwedeng hindi na lang natin i-account separately ang stock rights. So we have here a sample, no? A shareholder acquired 10,000 shares for 1.5 million. So subsequently, the shareholder received 10,000 stock rights to subscribe for new shares at 100 per share for every 5 rights held. So the market value of the share is 140 and the market value of the right is 10. So the stock rights are all exercised by the shareholder. So when you acquire the original investments, ito yung entry natin. Debit tayo ng investment in equity securities, 1.5, credit tayo ng cash. Now, nung nakatanggap ng stock rights, if it is not accounted separately, wala tayong journal entry. Instead, gagawa lang tayo ng memo entry. So, yung memo entry natin sample, receive 10,000 stock rights to subscribe for new shares at 100 per share for every 5 rights held or a total of 2,000 new shares. Now, what if in-exercise na yung stock right? So, pag nag-exercise na ng stock right, so you simply debit investment in equity securities and credit cash. So, kung titingnan natin, itong amount na to class, that's 2,000 shares times 100 na subscription price. No? So, 200,000 lang siya. Meaning, nag-refer lang tayo or ang ating basis is yung atin lang cost or katong purchase price lang or subscription price lang ato ang gibasihan, no? Wala na matay value sa stock rights. So most probably the cost of the new investment is yun lang subscription price na equivalent sa subscription price. So what if hindi in-exercise, no? But sinel, no? Sinold siya. It was sold, for example, for 150,000. So, what you're going to do is, hindi tayo magre-recognize ng gain. No? Pag binenta natin yung stock rights natin, of course, you'll be debiting cash and the amount that we have received will all be credited to investment in equity securities. So, ibig sabihin, from the original 1.5 million, um, magdeduct tayo niyan ng um, 150,000. No? So, kung hindi siya in-exercise, so magiging 1,350,000 na lang ang ating investment in equity securities. Kapag hindi in-exercise, tapos binenta na lang no, yung ating stock rights. So, when the stock rights expire, so under this, katong hindi siya i-account separately, memorandum entry lang ating kailangan. So any subsequent transactions affecting the share shall be accounted for using the FIFO or average method. No? So for example, meron kang subsequent na sale, no? For example, so yan class ay i-account mo no ang pag assign mo ng cost sa iyong stocks will be based on FIFO or average method. Okay, so that will be all. No, yun lang ang ating discussion for this particular lesson. So I have given you activities and paper to practice and apply the concepts that you have discussed in this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.